When I browse through Twitter, I always love to see people shouting out their favorite games when their birthdays come up. Like the one that came up for Metal Gear on the 13th of July. It really made me think. What else came out that year? 1988, man, was one hell of a year for gaming. The very first Contra comes out, along with Zelda 2, Super Mario 2 in North America, Super Mario 3 in Japan, Mega Man 2, Metal Gear, of course, and there's probably even more I'm missing. All these releases in 1988 got me curious. Which year had the most effect on the video game industry we have today? Trying to quantify importance of anything is a little bit subjective. What's important to me might not be important to you. So to set a baseline, I'm going to use a basic dictionary definition of important, which is any event that strongly affects the course of events or nature of things. Using that definition, the next question I would ask would be, what are the kinds of events that have the longest lasting effects when it comes to video games? The most important ones I can think of are troubles with the law or government, the release of a new console generation, or the release of a game that leads to spin-off titles, multiple sequels, or new genres of games. The most important year would need to contain either all of those or most of those. So let's
dive on in.
I started by looking for all the instances where the gaming industry had come under fire from lawmakers. I found 3 or 4 years where Congress had attempted to step in and push some regulation, but out of those, only 2 of them really seemed like actual threats, where there was an actual danger to the industry. And that contained the release of a new console generation, as well as the launch of a game franchise that changes the industry forever. Those 2 years are 1994 and 2005. 2005 was the year of the hot coffee fiasco in GTA San Andreas. And in case you're not familiar with it, the hot coffee mission was part of the dating side missions in GTA San Andreas. That was unlocked by some modders. They would unlock some hidden code in the game that would open up the interactive big bone-in scenes during the dating side missions. But once Congress got word of it and Hillary Clinton got a hold of it, they wanted regulation. They wanted to put a requirement on all mature-rated video games to show ID before purchasing them, just like you would to buy alcohol. Luckily, this didn't pass. But the scariest part is, this wasn't the first time this had happened. Video games had come much closer to the arms of death when they were much younger and much more vulnerable. That was in 1994, the most important year in video game history. 1994 ushers in the creation of the ESRB, the release of the Sony PlayStation in Japan, which kicks off the 3D generation of consoles, the creation of a little company called Blizzard after a company called Silicon and Synapse changes their name to that, and last but not least, there's a little game called Warcraft created by that company Blizzard that would popularize the RTS genre as well as the MMO genre, quite possibly the most important video game title of all time. I know it might be a little rough to hear praise for Blizzard right now, with their ultra creepy boys club running rampant still.
I'm starting to think this is nothing but a boys' club. What's happening?
Boys Club. It's a boys club. We're the boys.
But don't worry guys, they found themselves innocent of any wrongdoing. So everyone can relax. This is a friendly place.
It's a friendly place.
Where you can have anything out of the fridge you want.
Breast milk, you made my day.
But hate them or love them, their legacy and importance to the game industry cannot be ignored. And they are a much different company in 1994. Speaking of 94, there's one thing I gotta make sure you understand. You have to understand the public perception of video games in 1994. Video games are seen as a product strictly for children by 99% of the American public. If you're over the age of about 16 and you play video games, you're seen as a loser in 1994. And being labeled as a nerd in 1994 wasn't as cool as it is today. It in fact wasn't cool at all. So there weren't a lot of adults playing video games at this time. So when these mature games were released, it angered way more people than you would think it would.
Finish him!
Whoa!
What?
It was bad enough that I remember my elementary school having an assembly about violent video games. That should be a little bit of a clue to how widespread this issue was and how upset the vast majority of parents were. And Congress was just as upset. They were so upset, in fact, they were willing to show false evidence at a congressional hearing to prove their point. I'm no lawyer, but isn't that committing perjury? You're lying under oath, aren't you? Even if you're a congressman. Personally, I think everyone underestimates how important this moment in gaming is and how close we came to just being destroyed by Congress. Because if they're willing to do this and lie about game footage and use false evidence and blame companies for things they didn't even do, you can only imagine the problems of the future. Just let me show you. This is the clip that Lieberman shows to Congress, and he specifically states that he's going to show two versions. The first one being the Sega version with blood, and the second one being the Super Nintendo version that's more censored.
First, we have Mortal Kombat, which is a martial arts contest involving digitized characters. We're going to show two versions of the game. In the first segment, which is Sega's version, blood splatters from the contestants' heads. When a player wins, the so-called death sequence begins. The game narrator instructs the player to finish, and I quote, finish his opponent. The player may then choose a method of murder, ranging from ripping a heart out to pulling off the head of the opponent with spinal cord attached. The second version, made by Nintendo, leaves out the blood and decapitation, but as you will see, it is still a violent game. For a lot of you to see, but there's blood splattering every time.
Kato wins. Flawless victor fatality.
This was the first clue I noticed as a kid, was the life bars, and how the character names are written inside the life bars on the arcade and Super Nintendo versions, but not on the Sega Genesis version. But even more telling than that is the sound. I'll first play the clip from Congress of Sub-Zero doing his fatality. Then I'll play the Sega Genesis version of the same exact fatality. Just listen to how different they sound.
Sub-Zero win fatality.
That arcade version has that dark, sinister music during the fatality.
Sub-Zero win.
It has the horrible, blood-curdling screams while his head's getting pulled off. It's badass. Sega wishes its hardware could do that, but this is what it really sounds like and looks like on Sega Genesis.
Finish him.
Now, I could spot this difference as a 9-year-old instantly. These two versions are night and day difference to me. And don't try to tell me this was done on accident, because if you showed Congress the wrong footage of something and the roles were reversed, you'd be going to prison.
In a federal pound-me-in-the-ass prison.
So the fact that Lieberman does this just screams red flags to me, because this was done on purpose to amplify emotion towards censoring a product that was already pretty heavily censored by the sheer fact that the home consoles couldn't run the arcade versions of these games. To even get the Genesis version to show blood, you had to do a cheat code.
Get over here!
The Super Nintendo version had none of that, and even changed finishing moves to be completely different from the arcades, so to be seen as more fake or cartoony. Lieberman was wrong, though, about the Super Nintendo version not having finishing moves.
That version does not have the finishing sequences, the death sequences.
It has them, they're just totally different. Here's an example.
Sub-Zero wins.
And shame on the Sega exec for not calling him out on this, because even as a 9-year-old I could spot it. So I think my examples prove that Congress was pushing this regulation really hard, and it was for more reasons than just to protect the kids. Someone on the politics side was benefiting from this.
I guarantee it.
That's all this proves to me, really. The video game industry in '94 is much weaker than it was in 2005, and the threat of regulation at this time could be the difference between life and death for the entire industry if handled incorrectly. It just would have stifled creativity way too early in the industry. Because if these congressmen would have gone scorched earth like they sound like they wanted to, the most popular genres of today would be decimated. Just listen to a couple clips from the couple hours of Congress footage I watched.
Teach our children all the wrong values. And in my opinion, they should not be on the market.
I find this segment deeply offensive and believe that it simply should be taken off the market.
About 2 months ago, I saw the video game Night Trap for the first time. It is a sick, disgusting video game, in my judgment. It's an effort to trap and kill women. Shame on people that produce that trash. It's child abuse, in my judgment.
Is especially repugnant. It ought to be taken off the market entirely.
Here's just an example. Let's just take one genre, first-person shooters, and think about all the games that would have never come out. This was the year of Doom 2, so that's where they would have stopped. That means no more Quake series, no Unreal series or their engine, no Half-Life series, which means no Counter-Strike, no CSGO, no Call of Duty, no Medal of Honor, no Halo, and I could keep going up to Valorant. You get nothing.
So you get nothing! You lose! Good day, sir!
And if you did get something, it would be Jimmy's Nerf gun simulator, and that would be the most violent thing you could have. And remember, that's just the FPS we're talking about. I haven't even gotten into any fighting games that would be gone, any of the real-time strategies that would be gone, any of the RPGs. Okay, I can't keep going on about the ESRB, even though it's super important. I could go into detail about how the president of the company would have been replaced by 6 politicians, and every single rule change would have had to go over the president's desk. But even if you took out the creation of the ESRB from 1994, it would still be in the top 5 most important years. Not only did it have the most important event, in my opinion, it had the most important console generation upgrade ever, in my opinion, the move from 2D to 3D. And we can't forget about the creation of a little company we call Blizzard Entertainment, and that game called Warcraft. Oh, and it's also, in my opinion, the best year to play fighting games ever. And Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis are still dropping bangers regularly. PC game devs were trying a bunch of new things at this time because they really had nothing to lose. Adventure games were going strong, FPS games were just hitting the ground running, and the birth of real-time strategy games had just happened with the release of Dune. Although it wasn't a smash hit, it did get the attention of a few developers at a little company called Silicon and Synapse, which would change their name in 1994 to Blizzard Entertainment. And in December of 1994, they would create Warcraft, quite possibly the most important IP in video game history. That one IP has led to multiple different games in different genres, and was the sole catalyst to the popularity of MMOs that we have today. It's honestly hard to overstate how important Warcraft is to the video game industry. It led to the most popular MMO of all time, World of Warcraft. It brought so many new gamers into gaming that would have never tried it before if they hadn't been lured in by the hype. Hell, even Mr. T got caught up in the hype.
I'm Mr. T and I'm a night elf mohawk.
Video games had officially gone mainstream by this time, and so had just being a nerd. Honestly, I think World of Warcraft made being a nerd like a normal, cool thing that you're allowed to be without being made fun of. The release of World of Warcraft really times well with the time where we start to see more TV shows and movies where the nerd gets the girl, or the nerd is the star or the hero. Like within just 3 or 4 years of the release of World of Warcraft, shows like The Big Bang Theory are released. The Transformers movies started up, with the nerd being the hero of those. Or movies like The Girl Next Door. There's too many to name, but it just really seems to add up. I honestly think it had a huge impact on that in our society. It normalized the video game nerd. There are very few games in the history of video games that you could say changed the way society viewed a group of people, but World of Warcraft is definitely one of those games. So the creation of its grandfather game, the entire reason it exists, I would say is easily in the top 3 most important events in video game history. Now, the creation of the ESRB and the creation of Blizzard and Warcraft should probably be enough to prove that 1994 is the most important year in video game history. But we can't forget about the console releases of that year, or the fact that this is the best year of all time for fighting game releases. The release of the PlayStation 1 starts off the 3D era for all console gaming. These are the first generations of consoles that begin to match the arcade machine's power and gameplay quality, meaning this is nearing the end for the golden age of arcades. But it is still the golden age of fighting games. This lineup is insane. X-Men Children of the Atom sparks the beginning of the legendary X-Men vs. Street Fighter games. Killer Instinct 2 is just released in the arcades, and Killer Instinct 1 is still so popular, I have to wait in line to play it. The King of Fighters series starts in 1994, and SNK goes hard with Art of Fighting.
Don't do it, brother! That man is our...
Samurai Showdown and Darkstalkers. Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 are still in the arcades. Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo is going hard too. And I haven't even got to the 3D fighting games yet.
Do you want my head to explode?
With the release of the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn in Japan, the 3D fighting games would see their rise to power at this time too. Virtua Fighter would be the first one on the Sega platforms in arcades and on the Saturn, with Tekken following a year later on the PlayStation consoles and in arcades simultaneously. This was the first time you could go practice on your home consoles. I used to do this with Killer Instinct. It worked out great. Learn all my moves on the Super Nintendo at home and then come into the arcade and show everybody what time it is.
Tell them what time it is.
It's amazing how the Killer Instinct on Super Nintendo was allowed to have blood and finishing moves, but the Mortal Kombat wasn't, even though they came out real close to each other. I don't know. Oh well. Speaking of Super Nintendo, this was their best year for releases too. Super Metroid.
The last Metroid is in captivity.
Donkey Kong Country. Killer Instinct. Breath of Fire 1 and 2. Final Fantasy 3. aka Final Fantasy 6. Secret of Mana. And Super Punch-Out!
Yay!
And there's probably more I'm missing, but...
No more for today!
But okay, I'm done. It is too big of a list. That lineup is juicy. 1994 may have been the most important year in gaming, but in my opinion, the best years are yet to come. I know it can seem like gaming sucks today, with all of the microtransactions, NFTs, and pay-to-win garbage, but you gotta remember, it could be so much worse if senators were in charge of the content in your games. But you can thank the gods they're not. Okay, I'm gone. Peace.